Welcome back, everyone. I know I've said this now 8 times. This is the 9th time I'm going to say this introduction. So I hope you all don't hate me, but I have to do this. All right. Hello, everyone. And thank you for joining us. Quick change of outfits. Yes. I am Jackie Brenner, a pre-med student who has enjoyed meeting other STEM students from around the world through my TikTok and Discord STEM Potential. I can't believe it's been almost a year now since we started STEM Potential, which is an online Discord that provides a network for all students to share their unique perspectives from diverse backgrounds and create strong connections and more. With over 12,000 students from over 105 different countries, Discord members can act as mentors and mentees as they progress along the stages of their education, while also finding friends with common interests. I would like to give a shout out to all the members of the STEM Potential team for working so hard to help make this all possible today. I created these STEM Potential webinars in order to combat the lack of mentorship and representation that I noticed in STEM fields. Lastly, I want to introduce Ashini. She is the Vice President of STEM Potential, who I met through the 7-year BSMD program at Penn State and Jefferson, and is now a first-year medical student. I could not embark on this journey without her, and she is my best friend, and I'm so proud for her to just be here with me all the time. We will both be moderating sessions this weekend, as you know, and she'll be moderating part 3 of this session. I am proud and humbled to have assembled a group of incredibly successful medical students. Please note that today we are sharing students' opinions and advice about medical school admissions process. We have not received any direct information from admissions departments, nor are we an official accredited business in this space. This session will be highlighting 4 medical students from the Miller School of Medicine that all have unique perspectives and stories on how they were accepted into medical school. I want to start off by allowing each panelist to give a 2 to 3 minute introduction. So let's start off with Donovan, who is joining us for the 2nd time and was with us last year for the Pride Month webinar. So we're happy to have you back.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much, Jackie and Ashini, for the invitation again. I'm happy to be back and sharing what I can to all the people who are out there aspiring to become physicians and want to pursue this career path. So just a little bit about me. I'm originally from North Little Rock, Arkansas. I left to go to college in Boston at Boston University, studied biochemistry and molecular biology there. And then I took 3 gap years between graduating college and starting med school. I did a special master's program at Boston University, the Master's of Medical Sciences, and I worked for 2 years full-time as an HIV prevention counselor and tester at Boston Medical Center. So had a really wide array of experiences going into medicine, looking at medicine from a public health lens. And that's really what ultimately catapulted me, very strongly into applying to med school, really from that angle of, helping marginalized populations in health and really leaning into, diversity in medicine as an important aspect of the care that we give to patients and their families. So that is what I'm about. And again, thanks for having me.
Awesome. Well, thank you. Maybe Hannah, you can go next.
Hi, everyone. My name is Hannah. I am a 3rd-year MD and PhD student at Miller, of course. I grew up in Boca Raton, Florida, and then I left for college. I also went to Boston, never ran into Donovan, though. I was at Tufts University, where I studied child development and Spanish. While I was there, I participated in research in the areas of maternal and fetal health, as well as pediatric mental health. So that led me to take my gap year. One thing that I'm excited to talk about today is that I didn't major in any science class, like I didn't major in chemistry or biology. I was really passionate about child health and also about learning languages and using that as a bridge to communicate with other populations and communities. So that was really my focus in college, doing the pre-med courses in addition to that, and then doing research to supplement those areas. So that really led me into the area of pediatric mental health. So I took a gap year. I worked at the NIH in the National Institute of Mental Health for a year, where I really focused on pediatric anxiety disorders. And then that led me into applying to medical school, where I started the next year. And that was in Bethesda, Maryland, is where the NIH research took place. So I spent a year in DC, which was really awesome. And it definitely led me into, I'm continuing to pursue pediatric health, public health, mental health, and those are kind of the areas of focus that I'm interested in right now.
Awesome. Well, thank you. We'll definitely touch on majors in college. That's a great question. Amanda?
Hi, everyone. I'm Amanda. I grew up in Maryland, and one of the main reasons that I wanted to become a doctor was because there are so many people in the medical field in my family. So I just kind of had role models growing up, and I feel like every couple years I did a check-in with myself, asking myself if this was really the path I wanted to follow. And every single time I kind of had a different reason, but I always ended up at the same answer. So that's how I really knew medicine was for me. And I went to college in Vanderbilt, and I majored also non-science majors. One of them was called Medicine, Health, and Society, which is basically public health. And the other one was classics. And after that, I took one gap year. I was actually working super close to Hannah in White Oak, Maryland at the FDA. And I studied birth control and then also vaccine design. And then I came here, and I've been loving it ever since.
Awesome. Well, thank you. And last but not least, Gabby.
Hi, everyone. I'm Gabby. Yeah, like everyone else here, I'm a third year MD MPH student at and I'm from Miami originally, so born and raised here. But I did go away for college, so I went to Notre Dame in South Bend, Indiana, for 4 years, and I majored in neuroscience and behavior, and then I was an art history minor. So same thing, like you really can broaden your horizons when you're an undergrad and be okay with it. There is definitely a possibility to get all of that done and get your pre-med requirements in. While I was at Notre Dame, I, again, really into art history, so I did a lot of art classes, and then I also did research. I don't like bench work personally, and that's a-okay. So I did psych research. I was in a sleep, stress, and memory lab, so I did a lot of sleep studies. So no hard science, which is great. And I was really into like intramural sports. So I played flag football, I played soccer. Lots you can do, honestly, while you're finishing your pre-med classes. And then I did not take a gap year. So I kind of just always knew, similar to Mandy, that I wanted to be a doctor. Really could never think of any other job that I want to do. I come from a family of doctors too. I'm a 5th generation physician, lots of Cuban and Spanish doctors in my family. And yeah, so I came straight through, and now in Miller, I'm super happy, 3rd year, also getting my MPH, which is a great decision that I made. And yeah, I also have a passion for medicine. From a genetics perspective, my younger sister has Down syndrome, so she was also really big influence for me for applying to med school and really just targeting working with that special needs population in my future, I hope.
Awesome. Well, thank you all for sharing those introductions. For part one, I just wanted to, ask you all, why did you decide to choose the MD MPH route? And more specifically, when you're filling out that application and you need to really fill out why you want to go MPH, what prepared you most during undergrad to be able to fill out that portion of the application? And what advice do you have for students who want to pursue an MPH? What could they really get involved in to go that route? Maybe Hannah, you can start us off.
Sure. There was a lot of different things in there, so I'm going to try to remember all the details of that question. So I actually learned about the program from another mentor of mine, which happens to be Jackie's mother, who introduced me to the program. And she kind of was the first person to really show me the integration between public health and medicine. And just because of what I'd been doing in college, she was rightly putting me in the direction of something that I was always working towards and I never really understood, which was the fact that I like understanding what's going on in the communities around and understanding, you hear it all the time, the social determinants of health, but when you're in medical school, you really do get a firsthand experience of how impactful that is. And just the percentage of the time that you spend in the clinic with the patient is nothing compared to what they're experiencing in their communities. And so that was a dyad that was really interesting to me. And so when I was in undergrad, the way that I got involved with doing that was I actually would volunteer at schools. And so this is something that I've continued into my medical education, is that I like looking at the perspective of, for kids specifically, and what's going on in schools that can influence their health, and how alternatively can the school system itself be a positive, or, you know, in many situations, a negative influence on individuals' health, physical and mental. So personally, I would say that if you identify an area that you find interesting, like schools and health, or just something that's community based, that you might not necessarily think. So when I volunteered in the when I was an undergrad, I wasn't doing anything medical. I was just a teacher's assistant, and I was just kind of observing what was going on in the classes and working with the kids, and having that one-on-one time to spend with kids was something that was super important in formulating what I was going to continue to do with my career. So that's to say, to wrap up, is that once you identify what you're passionate about, whether it's, you know, really bench research specific, or it's just a population that you're excited to work with, just get involved on any level and just start exposing yourself to different things. And it all kind of ties into itself in the end.
Awesome. Well, thank you. Maybe Amanda, you can follow up on that question.
Sure. I think I am one of the more like non-traditional MD and PH students, just because I initially didn't apply to UM's MPH program. I just applied for the MD program. And the main reason for that was because I knew I was interested in getting a master's degree during medical school, but I figured I wasn't entirely committed to MPH versus MBA versus anything else that I could do. But I just really followed my interests, and it obviously showed, because during my interview, the person interviewing me said, "Amanda, every answer that you have given has been related to public health. Why on earth did you not apply to the program?" And I just didn't have an answer. But I feel like it was one of those moments where, like, staring back in the mirror, somebody was just like, "This is obviously very important to you." And I always knew that. I guess I just needed some extra push to commit to this like integrated 4-year program. But once I looked more into it and decided to make that amendment to my application, I realized that it was something that I absolutely needed, because I think that it really grounds my medical education. And I think all of my classmates can echo this, because everything we're learning about the science and the public health behind it, and how we can really make an impact on our patients beyond just scientifically prescribing a medication or telling them one thing. We're thinking about what's actually possible and sustainable to them. So my biggest advice would just be to really follow your interest and ask, what is it that you're not going to mind staying up past midnight studying? What is it that's going to really be a passion for you 5-10 years down the line?
That's awesome advice. And maybe Gabby can follow up with that.
Yeah, for sure. So I think for me, similar to Mandy, I did actually always apply to both the regular MD and the MD MPH cohorts, but I think my eyes were a little bit more set on the MD cohort. But once I went to my interview day, I was so wowed by the MPH program. And I was like, wow, this actually just makes perfect sense for me personally, similar to like the other panelists here. I'm sure we all have personal connections with it. Just like Amanda said, based on what my life prior to med school was like, I was already interested in public health. I was really involved with, like I said, the special needs community, and that's a big public health sphere. I was involved in Best Buddies at Notre Dame, and I was the president there. So I was really interested in working with that population. And I also won a lot of medical mission trips when I was in high school. So that was actually really cool in seeing like the public health sphere in that perspective, like an international health perspective, or just seeing firsthand like what are bigger issues than just medicine can solve. So I kind of felt like that was really influential in me actually choosing to go into the dual degree program. I was a little nervous at first because I was coming straight from college and I wasn't sure what I could handle, because I felt, oh my gosh, I'm only 21. Can I do 2 degrees at once? But I think we can all agree it's definitely doable. So don't let that scare you if that is a fear.
Awesome. Thank you. And last but not least, Donovan.
Yeah, so I had an interest in service for really since I was like a young adolescent. Like from age like 13 until 20, I spent about a month and a half either like abroad in a different country or somewhere in a needy area within the United States doing service projects, where I would stay with a group, you know, for about a month to a month and a half doing some sort of like construction project or, sustainability project or things like that. So really from a young age, like I knew I didn't necessarily have the words at that age to say public health is important to me, but, social causes and marginalized communities were very important to me from a very young age. And that sort of showed itself as I became an adult and went to college. All of my spring breaks, all 4 years were alternative spring break trips. I also had a really big interest in foreign language. So I speak Spanish and Portuguese. And so that also sort of like opened the door for me to want to get involved, especially in Boston. There's a huge Latinx community of Spanish and Portuguese speakers. And towards the end of college, I started teaching English as a second language at a Latin American immigration service type organization that would help people like with their papers and learn English and, just like safety things. And I volunteered there, really enjoyed it. I also volunteered at Healthcare for the Homeless in Boston for a good amount of time. So that kind of like got me interested in public health. And then by the time I was in my gap years, I found that job opportunity to go be a STI prevention counselor and tester at BMC. And that was a beautiful opportunity to get to kind of integrate all of those different aspects of things I had been engaged in and interested in for many years. So it was the language aspect. I had a ton of Spanish and Portuguese speaking patients. There was the LGBTQ aspect of huge portion of my patients are from the community. Many of my patients unhoused, many of them with comorbid substance use. So that for me sort of pulled everything into focus as like, oh, like I really just enjoy, treating and advocating for marginalized populations and health. And so it really just made sense to me when I started researching schools to apply to. I knew had a good program. But once I really started to look at the MPH program, I was like, you know what, this just makes too much sense for me not to do it. It's a very community-based program. Like all of our rotations are in smaller community-based hospitals and things like that. So it just felt like a right fit for me.
Awesome. Well, thank you all for sharing those experiences. Now I want to move into part 2, which is about the application. How did you get in? So my first question is there a specific part of your background or upbringing that was important to bring up on your application that you didn't realize was important until recently? And another question to go along with that is, when you're writing that personal statement, how do you balance talking about experiences from like when you were growing up, like a personal story about your mom or a sibling, or between like that and, actual experiences you had in undergrad with the research or other clubs? Maybe Gabby, you can start us off.
Yeah, for sure. So I think for the personal statement bit, I think what I realized as I was writing it is really just telling exactly, almost chronologically, your story up until you're applying to med school. And it should make sense. Like you should have reasons for doing what you're doing. And then honestly, it made my personal statement flow. Like I started about like learning about my sister and what Down syndrome was, and growing up, like seeing my mom in her office and going to the office and rounding with her at the hospital when we would have to go to a birthday party and she'd have to stop at the hospital and see patients. And then just going through there and like based on my life experiences, what I did with that, what you do with your experiences in college kind of makes you who you are and really pushes you to want to pursue a career in medicine. And that's really what shows who you are. And I think med schools can tell based on that, which is always good. So I think my best advice is to really just like introspectively like look at what you did with yourself based on how you grew up. I think it's a good way to look at the application and the personal statement. And then what was the other question? I already forgot.
I can repeat the question. Is there a specific part of your background or upbringing that was important to bring up on your application that you didn't realize until recently?
Yeah. So for me, I think it was definitely the special needs aspect. The schools like all love like what I did. It's more than just having a sister with special needs. Like they love that I did more with it. I was not embarrassed by her. I was the opposite. I advocated for her. I actually got her accepted into my own elementary school, like obviously with my parents' help. She had a one-on-one shadow. So I think it was really just like, it's what you do with what life gives you. And I think as long as you can show that, med schools really love that. They also loved the non-traditional stuff. So if you're into anything that's not medical, they love that. It makes you different. It makes interviewers remember you. I bonded with so many people on my interviews with my art history minor because they either are cultured or have traveled, and I've traveled a lot as well. So a lot of interviews that I got into med schools, we spent very little time talking about pre-med stuff or medicine stuff. We would just like go on about travels or about even sports team. I'm a big sports fanatic. So it's really fun either joining like sides with people or just like going against people based on who they're sports fans of. So it's really, like I said, at the end of the day, it's just like showing who you are, because people want to see genuine people, and everyone's looking for different people to fill their classes, right? So it's just making sure that you're able to show that you're different, I think is important.
Awesome. Well, thank you. Maybe Amanda, you can go next.
Yeah, so I think one big part of my background that I believe worked in my favor was how much else I explored. Like Gabby said, like they'd love to know that as much as you are committed to medicine, you also know that you really are. If it's the only thing you've ever considered, then how do they know that you're not going to change your mind? I mean, med school, they're investing in your education just as much as you are. So I think one thing that they really liked that we also talked about in my interviews a lot was my involvement on my school newspaper. And one thing that I didn't really realize until I got to med school was how much medicine is really about communication and storytelling. So the fact that for 3 years in college, I would just interview people from such different backgrounds. I didn't realize how much that would help in patient interviews and in everything. And I think one big thing for me was just that I had reasons for why I chose medicine in the beginning and why I kept choosing it, despite all of these other interests that I had. So I think that was one thing that really showed my commitment and that my interest was deeper than one reason or something superficial.
Awesome. Well, thank you. Maybe Donovan, you can go next.
Sure. And I get that this is a hard thing for most people when they're applying or thinking about applying, is the personal statement, like, what do I write about? And honestly, it's hard because we're normally not the subjects of our own writing. Like, we're used to writing about books and people and ideas that are not like us. And so I get that that's a struggle for a lot of pre-meds. And I've talked to a lot of folks about that as they're trying to, come up with their narrative. But really, a personal statement should be very personal. It's not so compelling to read about what you did. It's much more compelling to read about who you are as a person. Like, what makes you you? Like, what qualities do you bring to the table? What insights, what ideas, what perspectives do you have to offer based on your unique life experience? And that is really how I formulated my application. And I believe why it was really successful is because I really took a solid 6 months to formulate my personal statement and very slowly drafted it. And just to loop back to your question, Jackie, is one thing that was really important for me in my application was talking about my upbringing. I'm from a very conservative, religious Southern type of environment, home community, church community type of thing. And when I got to college, I came out as gay, in the community, finally kind of stepped into my power, owning my truth. And there was a lot of backlash in doing that from people at home. And so there was a ton of growth and, sort of getting outside my comfort zone and stretching that I had to do in those years during college that had me really get in touch with the, marginalized communities that I never really honestly had much experience with or could interact with in the same way before, there was just something really unique about coming out and really experiencing that backlash and hate from a lot of people that had me look at my own life through a different lens to say, okay, this now enables me and allows me to interact with and advocate for other populations and other groups of people who also face marginalization in a new and different and more empowering way. So for me, that was a big part of my application, was just being really honest about that. I was like, I don't want to go to a med school that there's going to be, homophobic people or homophobic vibes, so I really was straightforward in my application about my coming out and how that influenced my decision to go into, sexual and preventative health, the public health realm and things like that. So, obviously there's, a fine line sort of, and what is, kosher to sort of put in an application and what isn't. But I think if your story has something in it that you feel like is a little vulnerable, but really is authentic to you and really captures who you are as a person and what your journey has looked like, put it in there because it's compelling. Every interviewer that I sat down with, talked about my personal statement. They were like, wow, your personal statement really just, I couldn't put it down. It drew me in. I was really invested. I was compelled to read about you and, what led you to the point that you're at right now today. So don't be afraid to really do that reflective work and dig in to your story and the insights and the lessons you've learned along the way, and really put that as a powerful tool in your personal, statement, as well as your activities to showcase who you are.
Okay, this is great. I have a couple follow-up questions. So when you're talking about advocacy and a fine line of what to put in your application, something that's come up is mental health. And I know you're also passionate about that. So my question is, how would you advise students to frame mental health in their application when people are worried about stigma and people who are hesitant to just bring it up in general, to not make the admissions committee worried about that they have mental health? So I was wondering what type of advice you have for that.
Yeah, just to respond to that, I think it's important that if you include a more personal detail about a low that you had, and I think there's a lot of value in showing some differential in different points of your story, some highs and some lows, because it shows that if you were able to come from a low back up to a high, it shows that you're resilient. It shows that you're learning, you're digging into what happened and trying to pull the life lesson out of it to better yourself as a person and also as an aspiring physician. So I would say the sort of rule of thumb for me when I'm advising people on their written materials is, you want to have seen something more sensitive like that through to a point of completion, or a point where you are on an upswing. For instance, if you had a really depressive episode that really impacted your grades one semester, which was true for me around the semester that I came out, my GPA tanked, and I had to really do a upward trend with my grades after that to pull it up to where it needed to be to even apply really. But I put that in there. I was my GPA dropped, my morale dropped, and I very plainly was this rocked my world in all sorts of ways that I wasn't expecting. But the follow-up to that was I knew myself now as someone who could get through something really tough like that. And this is what I gained from that experience. And here's how I then took the hurt and the anger of that situation and channeled it in a positive direction into helping these communities through my work. So you want to, if you do include something more personal like that, you want to kind of show them that you've wrestled with it and you've sort of risen with the challenge to be able to say I actually came out on the other side of this. I think if it's something that's not complete, or you're still in the thick of it, or I would say maybe shy away from talking about those things. But places where you've had some wins after some lows, I think is good to include.
Thank you. I think that's great advice. Maybe Hannah, you can finish us off on answering the original question and adding anything in terms of mental health as well, because I know you're passionate about that as well.
Oh, Donovan's always so hard to follow though. So I think something that I ran into a lot when I was worrying about my personal statement, not worrying about it, but going about writing it, was that I was kind of obsessed with the notion that all these schools were really looking for diversity. And I was really blocked by that concept because I was thinking of diversity in a very narrow sense about appearance or background. And I just felt like I didn't look very diverse. I didn't feel very diverse. I didn't know what that meant, but I kind of thought about it more, and it's more of a richness of experience that really makes you who you are and makes you the diverse individual that you are. So once I kind of wrapped my head around that new concept of diversity, everything kind of flowed. And I used all of my experiences as my strengths. So kind of like Donovan, I've had a really strong attachment to the Spanish speaking community. I studied Spanish in college. I'm a Zumba instructor, and I've like really sought out, you know, not because I have Spanish heritage in my blood, but just because of a deep appreciation and respect for, and kind of feeling like that's some place that I feel really comfortable, is learning the language and learning how to talk to people and traverse those barriers. And it came up a lot in my experiences of things that I had done. So that was something that I had talked about a lot. Additionally, something that I didn't know would be really important, and this kind of goes back to what Gabby was saying, is that non-traditional experiences are always awesome things to include. So I was a camp counselor, and I put that on my application, and so many people asked me about that on interviews. And I think it's because it's exciting. It's like fun to talk about. I had a great time. It's one of the best experiences in my life. But you need, when you write about something like that, just think about all of the amazing things that it can teach you. I had to learn a lot of responsibility caring for, you know, a group of 13, 12-year-olds who wanted to run all over the amusement park, and I was responsible for them, and, you know, having that responsibility to their parents for their health, for their well-being, you know, making sure everyone was in one piece. But I also had the responsibility to make them have fun, and I got to really just be my authentic, goofy self who I love to be. And I think when I talk about that in an interview, you can see how my face is right now. I get really happy and I love talking about it. So if there's things that bring a smile to your face and experiences that you look back on with just heartwarming memories, it could be the best bench research you've ever done. You were loving these bacteria growing on your dish, and you were getting so excited because it was growing and whatnot. Or it could be working at a camp with kids and wearing tutus on your head and 6 ponytails and having 9 girls jumping on you at all times. And it was like the best time of my life. And I wove that back into what I learned from that. That's going to make me a good doctor. I learned how to interact with children. I learned how to take care of them, a lot of responsibility, a lot of discipline, a lot of creativity and problem solving. You know, when it's raining and you've got a lot of kids to entertain, you know, you're going to always have to be thinking on your feet. So my biggest takeaways from what I have to say about your personal statement and thinking about your background is just really consider those authentic experiences and authentic parts of you that just make you smile and make you who you are, and that you want to share with somebody, you know, whether they be very traditional scientific or not. And that diversity really does mean anything to you, whatever it means to you and whatever is important to you, whatever makes you stand out, whatever makes you feel like you matter and you belong and you have a place, that's who you are. And that's where you need to dig into and write about.
I think that's great advice, especially, you know, when we move into this next section about experiences, ones that are not medically related. Like, you know, thank you for not only talking about your experience as a camp counselor, but I think it's important to, you know, reiterate how you said those buzzwords after on what that taught you. And, you know, you might not think about that at the time, but, you know, in retrospect now, if you can kind of, you know, keep that on top of your mind while you're doing that, you recognize that all these experiences matter and it doesn't matter what it is. So I was wondering if Amanda, Donovan, and Gabby, if you guys can all go into another experience that's not medically related, that was integral to your personal growth and application. Because I know not all students have access to medically related experiences. So I want to highlight, you know, what other experiences you can have, especially through COVID, when students might not have the opportunity to do research, like, you know, even being a TA for a class, for example. So maybe Amanda, you can go next.
Sure. I think one big experience for me in college was majoring in classics. And the great thing about medicine is that anything can really be connected to it. People are always very excited when I talk about studying Greek, and then they mention like the roots of words, and that can be a branch point for a conversation. And that really did happen in an interview. So when I was studying classics, I tutored, I studied abroad, I worked a lot with younger students who were also trying to go into different fields, but were exploring classics as a topic. One of my teachers asked me to babysit her student while she was teaching a class, and I don't know, it got me some really good experiences, and I was able to talk about that in my interview. And as everyone else has shown, like when you are really interested in something and you are really reminiscing as you're telling a story, it shows through in your interviews. And I remember not big part, but one part of my personal statement was how I connected a topic in neuroscience to something that I had learned in classics. And I kind of just guessed what it was based on the root of the word. And someone really loved that story, brought it up in an interview. And that was all from a random interest that I had in Greek mythology that led to me studying classics as an entire major. And one way that I actually realized how important that was for me formatively was when I was trying to decide what to write on my personal statement. And I actually just took a voice note on my phone and just recorded myself talking for like, I don't even know how long. And then I listened back to it and I noticed patterns in the things that I kept going back to and the moments that I found that I was just talking so fast and had to go back and re-listen to it. And I think that was one thing that I tell a lot of people, because sometimes you don't even realize the things that are most important to you and that really had a big impact. And like Donovan said, a big part of this is really reflecting and using that to come across and show people why you're so passionate about this and why you're so committed to this.
That's amazing advice. Thank you. Maybe Gabby, you can go next.
Yeah, for sure. I can go next. I think I've touched on all the things. I think the main theme I realized is I'm very interested in like the humanism in all of us. And I think that's really what's honestly most important about being a doctor, right? You're treating other humans. So I think I was able to like really show who I was. And I think the interviewers and med schools, when they read my application, loved that. Talking about like my art history minor, just really how analyzing a painting or any work of art is really what you're doing as a doctor every day, right? You're looking at the patient as a whole, you're learning to see things that others might not pick out. And the other thing too, like I said, I love traveling. I'll take any chance I can to travel anywhere in the world and just learning about all the cultures, all the languages that I've experienced. I think they really love that too, that I'm not closed-minded. Really, you're here to treat any single human body, right? Doesn't matter what they look like, doesn't matter what they have, what they don't have. So I think they really like that. Also, what was it? The sports part was really fun. Just like, it's really, yeah, basically, I think the most important thing is anything that's important to you, as long as you show that, med schools will love it. They love talking about anything they can. They probably want to take a break of talking about medicine because that's literally all they're talking about for every single applicant. They know the main commonality is medicine. So I think if you can give them something else that only makes you want to be a doctor even more, is always a plus that you can do.
Awesome. Well, thank you. And last but not least, Donovan.
Yeah, so kind of a little bit along the lines of what Hannah was saying, you know, if you had work experiences that you feel like were formative for you and may not even necessarily correlate at all to medicine, like you can talk about those experiences. Like I actually didn't put this in my application because I didn't have room, but it was kind of a funny thing. Like one summer, I literally stayed on campus and got free housing because I was part of this service that like would take the little micro fridges like out of the rooms and then like clean them and then like re-deliver them to like other rooms. And I only literally did it because it gave me free housing to stay in Boston so I could do another internship. But like that wasn't, I mean, like I just like hauled micro fridges around for a summer and it was definitely like manual labor and it, you know, like helped me, you know, kind of get back in shape a little bit that summer. So, you know, don't think like a certain experience is like not worthy or valid or something to be on your application. Another thing is like, if you have any type of like entrepreneurial ventures that you've been a part of, like definitely include those. I think that's becoming a really like hot topic thing for people to put in their applications. I actually started a math and science tutoring business while I was in college. Like I was, you know, offering tutoring one-on-one to students. But then as I got to med school and realized I like don't have time to do like 10 to 15 hours of tutoring a week, like I now have contracted tutors. I still run and administrate the business, but it's like 10 times bigger than it ever was when I started it like 8 years ago. And it's actually like, for me, it's right now like a full source of income. So it's like very much like something that I love to do on the side and am passionate about, but it's like medicine adjacent because like I'm helping a lot of pre-med students get the help that they need in their core science classes. And also like I do application readiness consultation and things like that. But it's really totally separate, like from my clinical, medical learning stuff that I'm doing. And I love that I get to partake in that, because really from a young age, like I've been very entrepreneurial. So I would say like very much look at your work experiences and money-making opportunities that you've partaken in, and like definitely look at those through a lens of like, is there something unique about this that I could showcase on my application?
Well, thank you so much. I'm now going to pass it on to Ashini to finish this session. She's going to talk about gap years. So I think that's important to cover, and then any last minute advice. So take it away.
Okay, hi everyone. So yeah, like Jackie said, I'm first going to ask about gap years. I know most of you took gap years except for Gabriella, I believe. So if you guys could speak to a little bit about why you chose to do a gap year and what you did during it, and how what you did during your gap year contributed to your application or your growth as an applicant. Hannah, if you want to start.
Sure. So I definitely didn't think I was going to take a gap year. That was not my plan when I started college. I thought I was just going to go straight through. I never really considered it. I didn't know what it was all about. And now looking back, it was definitely one of the best experiences that I've had. So the reason why I ended up taking it was also kind of logistical, honestly, was I was studying child development in Spanish and then filling in the rest of my course load with the pre-med classes. And I really prioritized studying abroad, especially being a Spanish major. I really wanted the opportunity to study abroad and do a language immersion. So because I chose to prioritize that, and also having the major in child development, therefore, in order to graduate and take the MCAT on time, it worked out better for me to take a gap year, just to finish all of that and have my application ready and just have a little room for everything to breathe, instead of just rushing from one thing to the next and just trying to cram it all in. This gave everything a little more breathing room, and I was able to complete all of the academic experiences that I was interested in on time. So I heard from a network of medical, pre-med students and friends that the NIH offers a large quantity of internships to postbacks. And they told me that you could basically find an internship in anything that you might be interested, because most of the 35 different institutes in the NIH are taking postback, not volunteer, you get paid. So postback interns. So I knew that I had just been doing research in college about maternal fetal health, which was mostly with peripartum, so pregnant women, and then looking at their emotional health 4 months postpartum. So that was really interesting to me, but I knew that my true passion lied in pediatric mental health. And so it was really important for me to prioritize that for my gap year. So there's a little piece of advice there is, if there's something that you haven't yet been able to explore that you know that you're really passionate about, don't just take the first opportunity that comes, even though it might be challenging and there might be a financial incentive to do so. If there is, everyone has different circumstances, but it was really important to me that if I'm going to take a year, I'm going to make it as meaningful for me as possible. And I'm going to try to really hone in on the things that I'm excited about and I want to learn more. So that's why I took a job doing pediatric anxiety disorders with the National Institute of Mental Health. I worked in their lab, section of development and affective neuro disorders. And so it was looking at both the neuroscience aspect of mental health and also the social and emotional aspects. So it was very cool. I really enjoyed it. I loved taking a year off of school. I had an amazing time in DC. Like, there is no understating of just having a year to kind of breathe in between college and medical school, to make great relationships with friends, to explore a new city. I had no family in DC. I'd never considered living there. All my friends were running off to Manhattan, and I went to DC by myself, and I had the absolute best time. And I think by the time the year was up, I had almost wished that I had taken another one. So, but I was ready to go to medical school, and I was really happy that I had gone this direction with just my timeline. And I think it was very formative experience for me. It showed me things that I liked about the field that I thought I was interested in, and a lot of things that I didn't. And that's important too. So I thought I was going to go into medical school being a pediatric psychiatrist, and that showed me that I didn't want to do that anymore. So again, I really think that a gap year, if that's something that you are interested in pursuing, is a very worthwhile experience.
Definitely. And going back to something you said earlier, like a second ago, about like not picking the first experience that comes your way. That was mentioned in the previous panel with the Harvard medical students. And it's definitely important to pick like what is the best option for yourself, because everything is unique about your own background and what your interests are.
Yeah, I had an interview for an engineering job, and I don't know why they interviewed me because I had no background in engineering whatsoever, but they were offering me a compensation for the position, but I just didn't think that I would be happy there because I had no idea what I was doing. And I was kind of disappointed. I thought I had the year all figured out. Like I was just ready to like figure it out, have that box checked, but I had a little bit of patience. And a few days later, the offer came in for an interview at the NIH. And so just being mindful, kind of like we've been saying this whole time, like if you have the amount, if you have a little bit of wiggle room to be mindful, like definitely take that into account as you're setting things up for yourself and try to give yourself the best experience possible for that year.
Definitely. Thank you. Donovan, if you want to go next.
Sure. So my response is two-pronged. One, as I mentioned earlier, like I really struggled my first like 3 semesters in college, like really, really struggled, like had very much a handful of like C's in certain classes. And like, frankly, like the GPA was not cute, like leaving sophomore year, going into junior year. Thankfully, like I had a very steep upward trend. Like I gathered myself all the way up during my junior year and senior year and made dean's lists and like near like perfect grades during those time periods. So it swung my GPA up, but like not so much that like I was in like a competitive application range. And someone actually I saw asked that in the Q&A section, like, what if you have a lower GPA? First off, you want to be able to show a strong upward trend, like, breaking the pattern of whatever was having you not get good grades during your, whatever time period that is, and then showing market improvement is very important. And so I knew that I wasn't just going to be able to apply to medical school outright with my GPA, and just to be like as transparent as possible, because I know you guys are all, wanting like numbers and things. Like I had like a 3.35 GPA from college. So I knew that I needed like a special master's program to be able to show them like, hey, look, like I am smart, I am capable, I can do medical school level coursework. I just had a rough time in college and some life things happened, and this is where we're at. So I did the master's program, did well in that. I had like a 3.5 in that program. And, that was really all that I needed to essentially show like, look, I can do this. So the other thing too, that I'll put out there is, applying to schools that are a little bit more holistic in their application review process. Like the schools that I ultimately was interviewed by and accepted by were schools that sort of take this like whole person approach. So, that's valuable. But I also knew, aside from just like the grades, like I had a lot of experiences in college that were worthwhile, but I didn't have any that really answered my fundamental like why medicine question. They were all kind of these like service related adjacent experiences, but nothing that I could really look at and say like, this is really why I want to go into medicine. And so I knew I needed time to develop that narrative a little bit more, which is why after my master's year, I applied and did the public health job with the STI testing and counseling, that helped me fully bring into full focus, like why I wanted to go into medicine. So after that first year of working there full time, I was like, all right, I'm ready to pull the trigger. I'm ready to apply for this upcoming cycle. Like, I know I can confidently say why I want to become a doctor very succinctly, very passionately, and very like pointedly. So I would say, unless you were like ready to like defend and market yourself very clearly with like a clear and cohesive narrative for why you want to be a doctor, consider taking a gap year to get that figured out, because really your application is a chance to market yourself. It's a marketing campaign. So the better and more cohesive and clear your brand is, and your flavor and the value that you bring to schools as a potential applicant, the more successful you'll be on the application.
Definitely. Thank you so much. And Amanda, go ahead.
Can you restate the question, please? I was typing away.
Yeah, of course. So the question is, what did you do during your gap year and how did that contribute to your application? And what led you to that decision of taking a gap year?
So for me, I just wasn't ready to take the MCAT. It was the end of my junior year. Well, that let me answer the question first. Towards the end of my junior year, I remember I had a class that I didn't like my grade in, so I wanted to retake it. It was one of my pre-med classes. So I was taking 2 of my science courses that semester and studying for the MCAT. And I just thought, am I going to put like half effort into these 3 things, or can I put my full effort into 2 of them and then push the MCAT off? So I pushed the MCAT into my senior year of college, finished on with those classes. And then I kind of thought about what I really wanted to do during my gap year. And I have an older sister who's also a medical student. And for her, she ended up doing a master's program. And I wanted a year off. So I decided to work instead of doing a master's program. And just I mentioned, like I retook some classes. So a master's program definitely would have been better to kind of make up for some of the academic struggles I had earlier on in college. But I really wanted the research experience as well. I really love bench research, which isn't one of the more popular things, but I really like just putting my music on, doing my thing and working on my dishes. So I signed up for something at the FDA. I knew that residency and all that stuff might take me different places in the country. So I really wanted to live at home. And my mom works at the FDA, and I thought there would be no better thing than to drive to work with my mom every morning. So that kind of led to my reasoning for why I applied there specifically. And I originally just had to network to get my positions. The NIH is probably more used to pre-meds, but the FDA, I kind of had to reach out to people myself. I remember I went to a talk one day and I walked up to her after and just asked if she knew anybody who was looking for somebody in her lab. A couple of weeks later, she emailed me, and that's how I got my FDA job. So don't be afraid to network and also use the predetermined applications. And is it okay if I answer a question that somebody just said about?
Absolutely.
Oh, maybe someone answered it already, about withdrawing from a class. It's not a thing that I was happy about doing, but I just had to think about the fact that having 2 majors and then a minor in chemistry, most of my semesters, plus being pre-med, most of my semesters were either 15 or 18 hours. So would I put all of my energy towards this one pre-med class that I obviously didn't get a strong foundation in and was going to struggle the rest of the semester in? Or was I going to try to do the thing I didn't want to do and withdraw, and then make sure that the other 4 or 5 classes that I was in came out strong? So it's a matter of just balancing those decisions. And I'm happy with the decision I made. But it just kind of made me realize that I really had to buckle up. Like as Donovan said, you can have a bad semester, you can have a couple bad semesters, but at some point you need to buckle up and show these admissions committees that you can handle the pressures and that you can come out resilient and stronger on the other side. Because that's a lot of what medicine is throughout our careers.
Definitely. Thank you so much. Gabby, if you want to touch on a little bit about why you chose not to do a gap year and any advice for going straight through to medical school.
Yeah, for sure. I just want to say straight off the bat, advisors, I think, unanimously push for gap years. So if your advisor is telling you take a gap year, the next advisor will tell you the same thing. I think there's very few left in America that'll be like, no, don't take a gap year. I don't know if it's because it's like makes their school safer, make their stats look better or what. But if you really, really don't want to take a gap year, that's also possible. So it's up to you. Like I said, like the other panelists have said, there are so many good reasons to take gap years and there's so many good things to do with your gap year. But I think I was just so set on it. So I think for me, it took lots of scheduling and becoming really not dependent, but close to my advisor. I got really lucky. My neuroscience major advisor was the best. I would kind of sit with her at the end of every semester and be like, help me make my schedule for next semester. And we'd sit there and I wouldn't leave her office until my schedule was made. And I even studied abroad. I went to Chile and I took 0 science classes for a whole semester because I sat there with my advisor and she was like, okay, that means, sorry, you're gonna have to spend a summer in South Bend and take physics because there's no other time for it. And I did that. I stayed in South Bend for a summer and took physics. And I had the best time of my life in Chile doing no science. And then that was fall junior year. And then, yes, I did miss the football season. I had to sacrifice that. And then spring junior year, I knew after coming abroad, I had to like bunker down and study for the MCAT. So I did. But I knew that was okay because it left me to have a super fun senior year. And I was just abroad having a great fall semester of junior year. So I was like, I can, have a spring semester in the deep of winter anyway, studying for the MCAT. So I think it's just that, talking to a lot of people, looking at your application over and over again and making sure that you are okay with not taking a gap year, and really finding good mentors who can help you and really let you know if you're making the right choice and if there's anything that you need to fix or change, that you make those changes. And if you don't take a gap year and you still apply and don't get in, apply again if it's really what you want to do. We have people in our class who are those cases where they didn't get in at first and then are now in our class and are doing amazing. So that's another option too. Like, don't get so discouraged if you don't get in the first time.
Awesome. Thank you all for that amazing advice, whether you took a gap year or not. I think it's really important to realize that like everything is tailored to your own background and your own needs and priorities. So for our final question, being cognizant of the time, I just want to ask you all, if you could go back in time and do anything differently, would you do anything differently? And if you wouldn't, do you have any like last minute advice for anyone who's listening? Gabby, if you want to start us off.
Sorry, can you repeat that? I was typing my email in the chat.
Yeah, all good. So if you would go back, would you do anything differently? And if you wouldn't do anything differently, is there any last minute advice that you want to give?
Yeah. I mean, they say hindsight is 2020. But honestly, I don't think I would because I've typed in the chat, to me, work-life balance has always been a priority to me. Still is in med school. Yes, it's still possible. So I think I still did that in college. I went to all the tailgates. I went to all the football games. Did it make my Monday through Friday a little more stressful and full of work? Yeah, but I had a great time on the weekend. So I think if you have that as a priority balance, there's definitely a way to still succeed and keep that. And it's been really important for me in med schools too, for my personal wellness, to keep a balance and still be here. I'm still here in med school and I'm still doing okay. It probably actually helps me do better because it's important to check in on yourself. So I don't think I would change anything. If you still want to go abroad. There's a way to do it. If you don't want to take a summer class like physics to make it on time, then find a program that does offer science classes. But I think if I had to change something, it would be an undergrad learning that it's a-okay to ask for help in a class that you're struggling. It's okay to go to your TAs. It's okay to see your professor at office hours before it's too late. Don't wait for the second or third test, So I think that's one thing I would change, is like being smarter about the system earlier in my college career.
Definitely, that's great advice. Thank you. Amanda, if you want to go next.
Sorry, what was the question again?
If you could go back, would you do anything differently? And if you wouldn't do anything differently, like, do you have any last minute advice?
I really loved my gap year, so I would have not fought it for so long. I really didn't want to take one, and I remember I was pushing my MCAT until I finally was just like, all right, I'm going to push it past June and not apply this year. And I feel like just the mental mind games I played, like stressing myself out, was just not worth it. It's 1 year, 2 years, 5 years, 10 years of your life. And if you end up in the same place, then it's great. So I think I wouldn't have stressed myself out about that so much. But besides that, I mean, one big thing is that when you make mistakes or whatever you want to call it, you just have to make sure that you grow from them and try to stand by your decisions. And if you don't stand by your decisions, just make sure you don't make that decision again. And yeah, just a big thing is reflecting, making sure that if something doesn't go your way, you don't just ignore it, because it will come up again.
That's something that's come up in a lot of the previous sessions, is reflecting on your own experiences and like your growth from those experiences. So thank you. Donovan, if you want to go next.
Yeah, I would say it's really a marathon, not a sprint. So, this career path has many years of training and school and further training. And then you're like, finally, when you're an attending one day, you're like at the bottom of the ladder, and then you just are, climbing up from there in your medical knowledge and expertise. So my biggest piece of advice, and this is something that I did, and I will tell anybody, is if you do not feel ready to push yourself into the next phase of applying and getting to where we are, do not force something that is not ready. Like, you cannot force a flower to bloom. It will bloom on its own time. And, I had to do that actually a couple of different times. I actually would have applied 2 years earlier than I actually did, because I knew at both of those junctures, I knew I needed to push my MCAT back, kind of like Amanda had mentioned. And I'm glad I did, because I had more time to study, my score was better. And then I pushed it again another year, because I knew that I wanted to have worked a full year in that clinic setting, learning and gathering reflections from that experience to be able to really put that in my application. So, let yourself really not get spooled up on a particular timeline. This career is forever long. So, if you need that extra year, or if you need that extra 6 months, or even a couple of years extra, like, it will give you a ton of peace of mind and confidence in yourself and in your application to know that you did it at a time when you felt like it was right to pull the trigger. So it'll also save you a lot of heartbreak if, you apply and then don't get in. It's just like, you don't want to go down that road if you don't have to.
Definitely. Thank you so much. And last but not least, Hannah.
I know we're running out of time, so I'll be really brief because I wouldn't change anything. I'm very happy with the way that I did it. And kind of like Donovan was saying, if anything, I would have taken an extra summer to work at sleepaway camp and then taken extra gap years if that's what I had to do, because that was the one experience that I did choose work over play. And I chose to take Orgo Chem over a summer. And then I had to call the camp and tell them I wasn't coming back. And it was really heartbreaking for me. But take your time, trust the process. Somebody wrote in the Q&A, if we edit personal statements, that reminded me, I'm happy to help edit personal statements, by the way, but that reminded me of something I wanted to mention about the personal statement as my last piece of advice. If you choose to write about a person who influenced you, make sure that this is still about you and not about that person. So my dad's an anesthesiologist, and was he influential to me? Yes. And my grandparents were teachers, so I integrated that in, but it's still, whatever you talk about, don't make this about how amazing my grandparents are, that they were teachers and they taught special ed in an underprivileged neighborhood in New York. Like, great, let's interview them for medical school. You need to just move on from that, mention what was influential about what they did to you, and then talk about how you've, internalized their lessons or what you take from them that you're now going to pay forward and apply. That is my hugest piece of advice for personal statements, because so many times I'll help a student read and they've written like, my mom's the best doctor in the whole wide world. It's like, great, she already went to medical school. So what are you going to do? Show the world what you're going to do now.
I think that's fantastic advice, and this whole session has been incredible, which I expected. And also, I'm upset that Donovan left, because I was going to say, although I love you all, I wish he was like my big brother, and that's what I see him as, because everything he says is just anyway. Thank you all again for taking the time out of your afternoons to participate. I know you guys are all so busy and have so much to do and enjoy the nice weather in Florida. So I just wanted to say thank you again. I know I've learned so much from the discussion today. Your presence here will help guide so many students into a successful career in STEM. Please note that the recordings of this webinar will be available soon on the Discord. Sorry, hour 4, day 2. I need more coffee. Anyway, I look forward to interacting with everyone on the Discord soon. We have one more webinar. We have WashU. It's going to be an amazing panel, a mix of MDs and MD PhDs. So make sure you stay. But thank you guys again. I'll make sure to get anyone's email from all these panels who agrees to share them, and I'll put that up on the Discord. So if you haven't joined the Discord yet, just go to the STEM Potential website and the directions are all there. Thank you guys so much again, and I'll speak to you all soon. We're on the same wavelength, kind of.
Full hand.
Good.